What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm here today. I'm making this video for a couple reasons. First and foremost, it's Victory Monday. So finally, after all this time, right, we are now 8 games in. We are halfway through the season. Obviously, we're 1-7, so that sucks. But we finally got a fucking W. I mean, it obviously took this long for a reason. And frankly, you know, if I'm being honest, you know, and obviously I've been consistent about this at the very beginning of the season and throughout much of the season. I did believe that we were going to go 0-16, and certainly there was a high probability of it. And we very much could have even lost, you know, this game against the Jets had there, you know, been some key differences that, you know, mostly pertain to, you know, the Jets. I mean, the Jets, like I said, the reasons why we won this game are because the Jets are bad and they're massively injured, and then got more injured in this game. And then also because they were massively victimized by terrible officiating. There was terrible officiating on both sides of the ball, but the officiating that affected us was rather inconsequential. I'll review that a little bit as we go through, but and because the Dolphins players, man, they played hard. They're playing for their careers. They're playing for their pride. They're playing for, you know, a win, man. They're not, you know, there's the other reason why I'm making this video is because I want to respond to Douglie-Do-Wrong's response to the game, his game analysis. But one thing he said is that they were playing for the coaches. No, they're not playing for the coaches. Because, and like, it's just, look, the players have been clearly frustrated. I mean, there's so many examples, right? Bobby McCain, Xavier Howard, Christian Wilkins, guys getting ejected, what did Bobby McCain do? He was talking shit to the fans, right? To the Bills fans. Oh, he supposedly spit on one of them or whatever, right? But Xavier Howard, Christian Wilkins both got ejected, right? Minkah Fitzpatrick wanted to get traded, right? And did get traded. Kenyon Drake apparently had no interest in signing an extension with the Dolphins, right? So you're just, you know, completely ignoring pieces of context if you don't mention that, if you don't talk about that, how there is a lot of, you know, there's evidence to suggest that it's not so much the coaches, right? Because players have expressed frustration with how they've been used. Not just players that have left, like Minkah Fitzpatrick, but others as well. And they've also, like Jerome Baker, expressed that, yeah, you can't really talk to Flores because you're worried about your own job, and there's no real, like, you know, open lines of communication, and so on and so forth. So, like, you know, there's been on many levels expressions that would lead you to believe logically that they are not happy with the coaching staff and the decisions that they've made, and so on and so forth. And that, especially when then you add on top of it, you know, a lot of these massively questionable decisions with the pretext of a tanking season hanging over that, right? Because that's important context. This season was set out to be a tank to get the #1 pick in next year's draft and get a quarterback high, okay? So with that pretext, and then with the decisions that have been made subsequently on top of it, the 2-point conversion, the 3rd and 20 play, you know, players see that, and then whether or not, you know, we continue this debate on whether or not the noise gets into the building. Of course it gets in. It's just whether or not, you know, the players and the coaches and so on and so forth. It's whether or not people are affected by it. Now, and to what level? Everybody's affected. They're all affected by it, but to what level? Now, with the constant losing, we got blown out for a while there, so on and so forth. The frustrations bubbling and boiling, right? It gets to that people start breaking and so on and so forth. Anyway, so it's not so much, but at the same time though, right? They're frustrated and they're upset with these things, but they're still good. They still have their careers, right? So that's why, like, for me, even though these players were put in an untenable situation where they were stripped of talent and leadership and all of that, the only thing, so to me, it's not that they bought into the system or the things that the organization and the coaching staff was doing, because the coaching staff is part of the organization. Brian Flores is one of the prominent fucking headpieces of the power structure, and he has say in these moves. He's got you know, an ear and an eye and a voice in that room, right? So it's not like he's not part of it all. And that was part of what him and Ross talked about when they hired him, is that he had to be okay with being absolute shit this year to go up and get a quarterback high in the draft next year. That was the entire point, right? So to me, it's not that the players bought in. It's just that they realized, well, you know, making it to the NFL is my dream, right? So I'm not going to just throw that away. So that's a massive data point to think about when I'm I'm putting myself in the perspective of the players now, right? So there's that. I got to think about my NFL career, right? Like or my NFL dream. I made it to the NFL. I'm on an NFL roster, right? It's not exactly where, especially for a lot of these young guys, and which is pretty much the entire team, because they stripped pretty much the entire team. Almost every player that's on their roster is their guy. I mean, we don't even know half these guys' names or faces yet, right? And they're all like first year players, undrafted free agents, blah, 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 right? Most of them, a lot of them, rookies. And so, you know, they're like, man, you know, like, this kind of sucks, but what am I going to do, right? Like, so they're not really bought in, but they're getting frustrated. They're upset by the situation, but what are they going to do? Especially the unproven guys. It's not like they could demand trades. Minkah Fitzpatrick could do it because he was a former first round pick, but also he has an amazing pedigree in college, and he's a proven commodity in his time in the short time in the NFL. And look, he's balling when he's put into the position that he needs to be played in, right? So real quick, he also talked about, Doug also talked about how Adam Gase didn't use Mike Gesicki properly and how this regime supposedly is. Okay, but you didn't want to give him shit for how he used Minkah Fitzpatrick totally wrong. And then you wanted to blame Minkah Fitzpatrick for being upset with that. So hypocrisy much? And then not only that, is Mike Gesicki doing well? He's doing better, and he had a career game without question. Again, a bad Jets team, bad secondary, and massively banged up. Tremaine Johnson wasn't in, right? And so, did he have a career game? Did he do great things this game? And has he been trending up in general? Yes. But he's also in, what is it? It's year 3 now, I think, right? It's either year 2 or 3. I forget. Anyway, point is, he's a couple years in. He was a draft prospect from Gase's regime. They evaluated and picked him. Yes, Chris Greer was here too during that and was part of that, so he gets partial credit. But that was a Gase pick. Gase wanted him because of his pass catching ability, and they tried to use him a little bit, but the way that things were, and especially since we had other tight ends that could do things like Nick O'Leary or whatever, and who else? We had somebody else too that was doing that did some all right things in the pass game. I can't remember. And Gesicki had a couple nice things last year, but he was I think it's his second year actually, because last year was his rookie season, I believe. Anyway, so yeah, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, last year was, anyway. So he was fresh into the NFL. It takes, especially for tight ends, it takes them, a year or two to start to come into their own. So it's about that time, right? So it's not like Brian Flores just all of a sudden developed him. No, he had time to develop. Plus, he's better at his blocking now, which he wasn't good at initially, and that was one thing that everybody gave him shit for. He's a lot better at that now. Why? Because Adam Gase used him and developed him in that way. He already knew that he was a pass catcher and had that prowess, and showed it in flashes last year, and really has only done that this year. It's not like he's blown up every single game. He had one good game, credit to him, but it was against a bad beat up team, full context. And so it's not like it just came out of nowhere. No, Gase developed him too. He's a lot better at his blocking now. And it was also in large part out of necessity because of, the way things happened with the offensive line, people going down, so on and so forth. And yes, you could say that our offensive line is bad this year and whatever. And they do use him in blocking schemes, at times now, because they need help. They need to chip guys and so on and so forth. And guess what? He's a lot better at doing that, and far more capable at doing that now. He's a much more complete tight end now because of the development that he got with Adam Gase. Anyway, so Gesicki, like I said, so he was saying that, like I said, he was saying how the players were used. So, but he didn't say that about Minkah Fitzpatrick or whatever, right? Anyway, so, but let me move on. Let me backtrack a little bit, because I started kind of jumping around a little bit. I actually intended, I watched his video and I took notes and I went through it, and I wanted to kind of do it in chronological order to kind of help me remember things, and I kind of jumped around a little bit. So let me back up just a bit. Okay, so, let me kind of go to the beginning then. So he kind of started off by talking about how we beat the Jets handedly. Like we just breezed by them. It was fucking no problem. It was all good. Like, we didn't even have to try all that hard. It was no sweat, blah, blah, blah. Like, really? First of all, I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's just absolutely ridiculous. It was not in any way, shape, or form handedly. And again, the primary reasons why we won this, and is not on the coaching staff, because again, there is ample evidence to show that at the very least, again, to be as fair as you could possibly be, they showed massive levels of incompetence with the way that they, again, just for some random reason, having Shaq Calhoun out of the game. He was one of your best linemen up to this point. Now, to be fair, did they perform all right? Yes. But the Jets are banged up and bad. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, right? We'll get more into all that in a bit, or as we go through, right? But so randomly just having, and he's been one of our best offensive linemen. So to me, what that says, and he wasn't on the injury report, not even close, right? So that, to me, that says you're trying to handicap yourself going into the game. And then with, the use of timeouts and some of the ways he did some of the other shit, some of the other calls that he made, he attempted to give them opportunities in this game to come back and to mount something and to get the momentum back on their side. They attempted, this coaching staff did in fact attempt that, right? Now, again, best case scenario is it's just they're bad at their jobs or they're not good at their jobs, right? Worst case scenario is it's intentional. You guys can decide for yourself, you know, which one of those you want to believe. I believe that it's more on the intentional side because, again, like, I actually don't really even disagree with people if you want to say that these guys are good coaches. I think that Brian Flores' resume has been pretty solid. But again, Bill Belichick didn't think he was quite ready to, you know, be the full-fledged coordinator. So he only gave him play calling duties. He didn't have the full-fledged job and all the responsibilities necessarily that came with it, just the play calling, right? So, and their defense has been more than fine since he's left. So they didn't really, you know, need him at the end of the day, as they've proven. Also, let's quick side note, the Patriots lost last night to the Ravens. Thank God. So one of my biggest fears, somebody mentioned this in the comments, was that we were going to go 0-16 and that the Patriots were also going to go undefeated and win the Super Bowl. Oh, well, I hope they still, you know, lose in the playoffs somewhere at some point, so that way they don't win another ring. But at least we don't have to worry about them going undefeated at this point. And the only undefeated team left is the 49ers, so now we just need them to lose a game somewhere. But, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, if they ended up having to play the Patriots in the Super Bowl or in the, you know, the championship game, the AFC NFC game, right? Then, you know, I'm pretty sure they're going to lose, right? Let's also note that in the game last night against the Ravens, there was a fumble by a Patriots player that it was pretty clear and obvious, right? Before he got down, there was movement of the ball. It started to come loose. Did it pop all the way out yet? No. But according to the rules, right, and they've done this time and time again and use this as the reason why, oh, well, the ball just started to make movement or whatever before he was down. And it was enough. It was clear. The ball started to come loose before the player was down. The call on the field was a fumble. It was ruled a fumble on the field. And then upon further review, they overturned it. Like, really, bruh? Get the fuck out of here, man. I'm so tired of the Patriots bias, too. That's really annoying. Anyway, so back to what I was saying. So, handedly, no, we did not beat them handedly, right? They beat themselves a lot because they did have a bunch of mistakes of their own, like the Sam Darnold interception. Is it good? Credit to Jamal Wiltz for being in the right place and making a play on the ball. But when you watch that replay, there were like 3 or 4 defenders around the receiver, so at least it would have been an incomplete pass. But good for Jamal Wiltz for being in the right place, and credit to him for making a play on the ball. But that's also really the results of that play has a lot to do with Sam Darnold and him just making a mistake, right? He just, you know, he should have just taken the sack. He should have tucked the ball and took the sack, because he should have seen, just like the Xavier Howard interception against the Steelers, he should have seen that there was like 3 or 4 Dolphins defenders blanketing that guy. And now, but to be fair to him as well, he was trying to throw it away, I would assume, and the Dolphins defender bearing on him just got to him and, like, you know, restricted his arm movement, and it became a fumble. But he should have known that too, and realized that not only was there are a bunch of defenders in the area that he was going to throw the ball, because also you got to make sure you don't get an intentional grounding, so there has to be a receiver in the vicinity, blah, 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 what have you. And then he should have also known that he had a defender bearing down on him. He should have just tucked it, took the sack. He would have lost like 3-4 yards, whatever, but he would have had a couple more plays to try and punch it back into the end zone, even though they already had a touchdown, should have had a touchdown. We'll get back to that in a minute. Anyway, so, and then again, they were massively victimized by terrible, terrible officiating. Was there terrible officiating on both sides? Yes, and he talked about that. But, you know, he framed it really only from the Dolphins' perspective. He didn't talk at all about the bad calls really on them. I think he might have like mentioned it once. I think he might have mentioned... Oh no, the only thing he mentioned on them was some play that they didn't call a pass interference on the Jets for. Some random play that they didn't call a pass interference on the Jets for. And he was like, oh, they called the pass interference on Parker, but which was bullshit, but then they didn't call one on the Jets. Okay, but how about you add in the other content? Because, and he wanted to bitch about the officiating like that hurt us and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Not really. Though, there, again, full context, there was bad officiating in this game. There were a couple bad calls on the Dolphins, including the one with Parker. Again, I disagreed with the call on the field. And one on Christian Wilkins early in the game, but completely ignores the fact that there were other, a couple major calls of bad calls on the Jets that fucked the Jets, right? And also too, back to the handedly thing, the Jets scored a touchdown on their first drive. We went 3 and out on our first drive, okay? And then on their second drive, they had an offensive pass interference on Robbie Anderson where he was within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage and he was a blocker on the play. The receiver had the ball in his hands. He was a blocker on the play, and all he did was just push the Dolphins defender, and he was within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, which is legal. Completely legal block. All he did was push him, right? Doug didn't mention that at all, right? But that killed their drive. They had to punt us the ball. So that was their second drive, okay? That's where it started. That's where the momentum shift then started. Because then on our next drive, we get helped out and progress down the field further because, in part because, did we do some good things? Did we move the ball a bit? Yes. But in part because we got 15 yards and a fresh set of downs off an unnecessary roughness penalty where Ryan Fitzpatrick runs with the ball. I think it might have even been a design run. I can't remember. I keep, and I've looked at it like 3 times, but I keep forgetting. But point is, Ryan Fitzpatrick runs with the ball. Okay. He didn't get a first down or anything. He got a few yards, whatever it was. He runs with the ball and he slides. He gave himself up. Okay. And then, one of the Jets defenders tries to go over top of him, but lands on him in the momentum of the play. Because, I mean, it's not like he's Nightcrawler from X-Men. It's not like he can just like disappear and then, you know, reappear off to the side of the quarterback so he doesn't land on him. Again, I hate that rule. I've been bitching about that rule since last year when they implemented it. And that rule is what got one of our defensive ends from last year injured. William Hayes tore his ACL because he tried to contort his body in a way that it wasn't supposed to be in, instead of just falling on the dude. I mean, obviously, like, you know, maybe like put your arms out to try and brace. Try not to like that. But the players shouldn't be, you know, expected to like try and contort their bodies in weird ways so they don't land on the dude. It's fucking football. They have pads on. They put that rule in to favor quarterbacks mostly Tom Brady. And so that way offenses can have more juice to them, right? And that's why last year we saw, records in scoring and touchdowns and blah, 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 right? In part because of stuff like that. Anyway, so it's a fucking terrible rule, but it was a bullshit penalty. We got a fresh set of downs and 15 yards off of it, and we ended up scoring points. So, he wanted to bitch about the penalties, but the Parker one, we were already up by like 9 points at that point. It's late in the game. Not really much is going to happen. Did it negate a 28-yard pickup from us? Yes, he's right about that. But he said that sucked the momentum from our drive. That was his words. But we were up and the game was almost over at that point. It didn't fucking matter. It didn't fucking matter. And the Jets obviously weren't going to do anything because they're not good and they're fucking massively injured and got even more injured in this game. So, I mean, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not like it was a good opponent. If it was one of the first 4 teams that we played, certainly it wouldn't have even been like this, and it wasn't like this because they kicked our ass because they were good teams. Anyway, we'll get more into that in a minute. So, no, we did not beat the Jets handedly. There was a lot of things that happened right for us. The only thing that we did right was the players, for their pride and for their jobs and their careers, they played hard and they overcame a bad team that has a lot of dysfunction and a lot of shit going on within their organization that's massively injured. They overcame that and played well. Credit to the players, but not the coaching staff. They're at best very inept. Let's continue. So real quick, actually, let's look at the first 4 games versus the previous 4 games, because everybody's talking about how the Dolphins have improved so much. And look, facts are facts. So have we, in the games that we were getting defeated, that we lost, did we start losing by less points? Yes, right? Obviously, to the Baltimore Ravens, who just beat the previously undefeated Patriots last night. They're an amazing team. Beat us 59-10. Patriots 43-0. Cowboys 31-6. Chargers 30-10. So did we make some progress there in the sense of like, yes, we held the teams to less and less points each time. We got beat by less. Yes, whatever. Did the offense have a little bit more life? Kind of, sort of. We went from 10 points to 0 to 6 to 10. So kind of, sort of. But all of those teams were playoff teams last year. The Patriots won the fucking Super Bowl. And they're all likely to be playoff teams this year. Okay? So, is there a pretty... In here, real quick, because facts are facts. Weeks 1 through... Just, these are defensive rankings. So, Brett, and I retweeted this. I'm sorry, I'm gonna screw up his last name. Brett Brykeson tweeted this out, and it's a comparison of the games, the first 4 games to the previous 4 games, the 4 games we just played, and our defensive statistics. I'm just going to give you the rankings. So total defense, first 4 games, we were 32nd, previous 4 games, 15th. First 4 games in passing defense, 29th, previous 4 games, or the most recent 4 games, 9th. Rushing defense, 32nd to 26th. Scoring defense, 32nd to 18th. Sacks, 25th to 20th. Third down defense, 31st to 8th. Takeaways, 30th to 26th. Okay, sure. And credit where credit's due. The guys have played well. They have been fighting. They've been fighting all season. They are more comfortable in the schemes now. So obviously that helps. Even though they've been getting, injured left and right, and it continues, right? So, so credit to the players for sure. Is there obviously some credit that goes to the coaching? Yes, right? So they do get some credit for that, right? With, in teaching the guys their schemes and so on and so forth. And are they helping some of these guys develop? Absolutely. So they do get that credit. Preston Williams, Mark Walton, Mike Gesicki is furthering his development, right? So yes, absolutely. They do get some credit there, but look at the fucking teams. Again, the first 4 teams we played, Baltimore Ravens, New England Patriots, Dallas Cowboys, and Los Angeles Chargers. All really good teams and all playoff contenders last year, including the Super Bowl winner, and all playoff contenders this season. Now let's look at the games that we just played. The Washington Redskins, the Buffalo Bills, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the New York Jets. Okay, 2 of those teams are 1-win teams, the Washington Redskins and the New York Jets. Okay, the Washington Redskins game, let's start with that one. We played terrible the entire game. We played like hot fucking garbage the entire game against a bad team. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? It was 17-3 until like the very end of the third quarter, or like the very beginning of the fourth quarter, whenever it was that Fitzpatrick came in. And then yes, the veteran guy played well against a bad team that was really tired and beat up at that point. Okay, credit where credit's due, but also don't like overhype it to something that it wasn't, because he wasn't spectacular and he played against a bad team that was really beat up and tired at that point. So he comes in, almost gives us a chance, right? The players almost gave us a chance, but then the coaching staff fucked it away. I'm not going to rehash the 2-point conversion, but watch my previous videos. I explain in depth why the odds would have been far greater, and we could have and should have won that Redskins game if they would have took it to overtime instead. I mean, just think of it logically for yourself. The extra point to tie it is far more likely than the 2-point conversion. Then you go into the play call, 2 blockers, 4 defenders, Mark Walton anyway. Watch my previous videos. Then we go, so the coaching staff lost us that game because of their calls, right? There were other questionable decisions within that game as well. But, you know, again, watch my previous videos. Then we played the Buffalo Bills. We lost 31-21. Obviously, 7 of those points came off of that, you know, pretty lucky 2-point conversion touchdown, or I mean onside kick touchdown that they got. But the Bills were relatively in control of that game, and they are a good team. Their defense is great, but their offense and Josh Allen have struggled a bit. Their offensive line has struggled a bit, so that was part of the reason why it was kept close and so on and so forth. But we did play a good game and so on and so forth against a good team. But again, in that game, there were massively questionable decisions in critical moments by this coaching staff that cost us the game. At best, massively questionable decisions that would suggest that they are inept. That's best case scenario. Or they made the calls on purpose so that way we could have the worst chance of success and the highest probability of failure. Then we go to the Pittsburgh game, 27-14 at the end of the day. And again, in this game, I mean, I'm trying to keep those, you know, the recap short. The most egregious, obviously, was the 3rd and 20, right? They called a timeout right before that play, gave them a chance to regroup, rethink, catch their breath, right? Then when he didn't need to do that at all, there was absolutely no reason, no point, no purpose to calling the timeout other than giving them an opportunity to fucking, you know, regroup and stuff. And then, and also apparently change your defensive play call, because they, you know, they changed their defensive play call. They go into it and then they run a fucking, an all-out blitz. Rush 8 guys, drop 3 45 yards back. We know how the play goes, right? And then give up a touchdown when you're leading 14-3. Now it's going to be 14-10. And then with 17 seconds left, you just decide to kneel the ball. You don't even take a couple shots to see if maybe you can get into field goal range, put up another 3. Maybe you can break one and get another score, right before the half, and then you get the ball again coming out after half. No. And then everybody wants to praise him for being aggressive, but like the vast majority, almost all of them except for like one yesterday, has been a massive failure. So how do you praise a guy for being aggressive and failing miserably at it, but then in times where it would be smart to go for things and be aggressive, he chooses not to? Like, really? That's like saying Donald Trump is a strong leader. Anyway, not to get into politics right now. But so, continuing on. And then the Jets, again, a bad team, massively injured, so on and so forth. Real quick, let me go through the injury report again for them. Because, again, so cornerback Tremaine Johnson and linebacker C.J. Mosley, safety Rontez Miles were out before the game even started, right? Before we even got to game day to see what their offensive line, Ryan Khalil, major names, major fucking names. And then, Kelvin Beachum, Braxton Berrios, Chris Herndon, Steve McClendon, Demarius Thomas, all hurt and banged up. They were all questionable going into the game. They lost their center during the game. That's why they had the safety that they did, right? So that's another thing. Okay, so there was a bad snap, right? That they had a safety. They were deep in their own territory, obviously right outside their goal line. Sam Darnold was still surveying the defense, and the replacement center, after their center got injured during the game, just snapped the ball for whatever reason, and it goes right past Darnold's face or whatever, and they ended up with a safety. Doug blamed that on Adam Gase. He was like, well, how many times have we seen that when Adam Gase was here? First of all, we've seen it, first of all, we've seen it probably a handful of times, just in general, okay? So let's say we've seen it like 4 or 5 times in general. And that was maybe once or twice in Adam Gase's time. We've seen it before that too. It's not like it's the first time that we ever saw it when Adam Gase was here. And it's not like something that only Adam Gase is known for. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then on top of that, how is that Adam Gase's fault? That's obviously the center's fault. And now, in his defense, again, he was the replacement. It was, probably loud. They were backed up. He's got adrenaline pumping through him. All these different factors, right? But how do you blame that on Gase? Like, there's no way that you can even connect that. Like, how is that even, like, it's absurd to make that connection. It's absolutely absurd to make that connection. Like, has it happened to us? Yes. Did it happen to us when Gase was here? Yeah, like once or twice. And it sucked. And it was a disaster. But again, that was probably in that scenario, and in those scenarios, bad banged up offensive line. Somebody was injured. We had to shuffle things. Guaranteed, right? We were moving guys around because we were having injuries. So it was a new guy that wasn't in there before. That shit happens. But you don't blame that on the head coach. You don't blame that on the offensive coordinator. You blame it on the guys that are in there. But you also still give them some benefit of the doubt and some, some leeway, because it's a stressful situation. Yes, they got to do better than that. They are professionals, so you do hold them to that standard. But also, we're human beings, so you can have a little bit of fucking sympathy and empathy and not be a dick and fucking understand that he's in a stressful situation. He's not even supposed to be there. The guy that's supposed to be there just got injured, and you're way backed up, blah, blah, blah. Shit happens. But that is the farthest person from blame is the head coach. Like, really? Like, come on. Absolutely fucking absurd. Moving on. So that's another thing. So we also talked about, you know, how the Dolphins were getting a bunch of pressure. Now, did we do all right? Yeah, we had a few sacks, which was like the most sacks that we've ever had in a game, which was cool. But again, against a bad Jets team, and their offensive line is not good, and their poor quarterback, man, I feel so bad for him. Plus, apparently they played the Ghostbuster theme song at the stadium. Dude, people need to stop that, for real. Like, I don't know why people think it's cool or okay to joke and mock somebody over potential, like, mental, like, I don't want to say issues or problems, because, like, I don't want it, like, it's not, you know, like, he doesn't have some, like, degenerative, like, you know, disease or something like that. It's not like that, obviously. It's not like an illness or something like that. But, I mean, the dude is in a fucking, you know, shitty situation, man. Like, be fucking nice people. Why do you gotta, like, throw that? That's why I completely disagreed with them airing that. Like, I think that was massively disrespectful. But, of course, you got all these fucking pricks out there that are just douchebags and don't give a fuck. So, whatever. But anyway, but we got, you know, that pressure and stuff because their offensive line is garbage. And again, massively banged up going into this game, and then lost guys in this game, right? So does that take credit away from the guys who did good things? No, but it's not the full context at all. And the fact that their offensive line is garbage is a huge deal. That's massively important. Okay. I mean, clearly, because we're like last in the league. I mean, the defensive statistics there, we were like, in sacks, we were, I think the first 4 games it said 25th, and then in the previous 4 games, 20th. So we only rose up to 20th, which is still in the back half of the league, but it's been against bad teams for the most part. The Steelers aren't a bad team, but they've been having issues. Big Ben's out. They've lost a lot of talent, obviously, so on and so forth. Mason Rudolph, it was his first game back. He had to shake off some rust, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, you gotta have the full context. The full context matters. All right, let's continue on. So also talked about, he defended Christian Wilkins, which I do agree with him on that, because, you know, he was talking about how, like, you know, some people are saying that Christian Wilkins is a bust. Now, that's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous so I agree with Doug on this point. It's ridiculous to say that he's a bust. It's his first fucking year. Like, come on. It's not reasonable or fair to judge any rookie until their rookie contract is up. Give that, because they got to adjust to the NFL. That's one thing. It depends on what position they're in. It depends on, you know, do they get injured or not? You know, just all kinds of things. Speed of the game. What is the circumstance that they're coming into? Are they coming into the New England Patriots? The you know, defending Super Bowl champions? Or are they coming into the tanking Miami Dolphins? Right? So it's not to, and then development over that time. How do they develop over those first 4 years? Like, it's absolutely absurd to say that he is a bust. But at the same time, you know, he hasn't had that much production. He finally got his first sack, so good on him. But it was, again, for the full context, because that had a lot to do with their offensive line. They initially had, when you watch the replay, when you watch the tape there in the film, they had him blocked, and for some reason they just let him go. Like, they initially had him blocked, and then they just, like, kept moving along as whatever their protection scheme was, however they were supposed to, you know, whatever, they just kept going along without actually, like, engaging him substantially. They just kind of like, it was like they chipped him, right? Like it was just a chip and they didn't actually like fully engage him. Because then he had just a straight path right to Sam Darnold. So good on him for pursuing it, but, bad on the Jets offensive line for being bad. So there's that. Also, he talked about, how Ryan Fitzpatrick is just like, amazing with his placement, how he's putting, the ball in places where only he, or where like Gesicki and Parker and so on and so forth can get it. Parker had a good game, credit to him. Preston Williams had a good game, credit to him. Unfortunately, he got injured with a knee injury, so that's going to be a point of contention going forward as we wait to see what happens with him. He's supposed to have had an MRI today, but I have yet to hear any news about what's going on with him. So I don't know if we should be worried about that or not. But we definitely have to keep an eye on that, because if we end up losing Preston Williams, that obviously is going to be a massive blow to our offense. And I want to win games. There were people even saying, I saw people like retweeting to the news that he got injured, saying, lock him up, put him on injured reserve, just shut him down. Like, no, let's go try and win more games. That we have a couple more that are winnable. But some of these people want to just fucking lose to guarantee that first overall pick. Anyway, but back to Fitz. Has he done good things in his career? Yes, but he's also shown that he's going to be due for a massive fall back down to earth. Now, he's played well in the games he's played, but again, it was against the Redskins, only about one quarter, and it was against a bad team that was tired at that point. This past game against the Jets, a bad team, their secondary is not great, and he does have, big go up and get it receivers, and all three of those guys, Preston Williams, Devontae Parker, and Mike Gesicki, are big body, go up and get it, 50-50 ball kind of receivers. So, is Ryan Fitzpatrick lucky that he has three guys that he can just like lob it up to and just toss it up in their vicinity and they can go get it? Yeah. And does that help him out? Yeah. But it's not like he's doing anything spectacular. Now in the Buffalo game, was it the Buffalo game? Well, anyway, the previous games, right? His stat line was all right. He wasn't spectacular. He just played okay, right? This was actually the first game where he, had a stat line that was like really good. He was like 65 or so percent completion percentage, I think, if I remember correctly. Let's see, what was he? He was 24 for 36, 66.7% completion percentage, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 118.8 passer rating, right? And then, Gesicki was 6 of 6, 95 yards. Preston Williams, 5 of 9 for 72 yards, 2 scores. Devontae Parker, 4 of 6 for 57 yards and a score, right? But all of those guys are the big body guys and so on and so forth. The guys that had the biggest games. So, but again, and also against a bad, massively injured team. Tremaine Johnson wasn't out there. None of their corners are like really anything, right? So, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt. And so, like, for example, we go to Indianapolis next week. They are a good team. They have a good offensive line, a good defense. Jacoby Brissett, we'll see how that works because he did get injured in this past game against the Steelers, to whom they just lost to. Also, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So, we play the Colts, and they're a good team, and we go to Indy for that game. Okay, so there is a substantial possibility that this upcoming game is the game where Ryan Fitzpatrick has his fall back down to earth, and where this team has their fall back down to earth. So this next game will actually be a good test, because this will be a game now against a good team, like a legit good team who's playing well, their record's good, and they're trending up. They're going to be looking to push for a playoff spot. So and then the Bills after that. So those will be two good tests, and to see how this team goes forward and how they respond. And to show more of their progress, right? Because if they could come out with a win against Indy, then I'll say you've really made some progress. But if we end up losing to Indy, first of all, then that in and of itself is an obvious regression, because we just won. So having just won and then losing subsequently after that is a regression. But then we'll also have to see how the team ends up performing. And we'll also have to see if Preston Williams is all right and if he can make it. But, does the offense take a step back? Do we, only score, 14 points? Again, we go from 26 back down to 14. And then do we end up letting up like 30 plus points again? Right? So, have we completely avoided being the worst team to ever exist? Not yet. But, considering the fact that we've had some okay games against some bad teams, and actually got a win yesterday, that has helped the cause. But we're not out of the woods quite yet. Let's see. Also, talking about the Jets touchdown too, because Doug talked about it, right, a little bit. And so, his stance was he was defending the call because of the rule. But the rule's a problem, because it's bullshit. Right? So anyway, but let's look at it, right? So this was right before the Jamal Wiltz interception, that one interception, right? The Jets, and it was right after that 78-yard kickoff return, because we just scored a touchdown to go up 21-7. We kick off, they get a 78-yard return, set themselves up in great field position. And then, what was it? They ran the ball on first down. Okay. And yeah, they ran the ball on first down. There was a minute and like 30 something seconds left. They ran the ball on first down. They got like 2 yards. So it was going to be 2nd and 8. The clock was running. Brian Flores, for some fucking reason, decides that he wants to call a timeout to give them time to regroup again, to figure out what kind of play call they want to do, and to get set, and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. He gave them that chance. He gave them that opportunity, and then they scored a touchdown. It got called back, but it shouldn't have. Now, when you watch the replay, the receiver, I can't remember if it was a tight end or a wide receiver. I think it was a tight end. But anyway, the player catching the ball, he gets it. He puts it in his hands. He gets a firm grip on it in his hands. He gets, I want to say it was his right foot flat down inside the end zone, and then drags his left foot, right? Okay, but the rule is that if you can't make a football move, then you have to control the ball all the way to the ground, and it can't move at all. At all. That's the rule. Okay? Now, it did move a little bit, but it was after he was clearly in possession of the ball and had both feet in. It was impossible for him to make a football move because he's toe dragging and falling out of the back of the end zone. So no way to have a football move. But the ball never actually touched the turf. It shifted just a little bit as he was falling to the ground, as he was tucking it in and falling to the ground. Just barely. But that's why the rule is fucked up. Part of the reason why the rule is fucked up, because it's so specific, and that's ridiculous. The dude caught the ball. It never left his grip. He had full control of it, full possession. It never touched the ground at all, right? Like, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, you know, even the fact, like, even if it touches the ground, if the dude has clear, you know, if it's pretty obvious he caught, like, okay, so I never played, real quick, I never played football for, like, my high school or for any, like, you know, real team, but I played a lot of fucking backyard football, okay? And either you caught the ball or you didn't. And you know how you know? Because either when the ball gets to you and you continue to run, or after you've been tackled, you still have the fucking ball in your hand. Okay? If it didn't touch the ground before it got into your hands or into your body, you caught the fucking ball. Like, the super specific, convoluted fucking catch rule is absolutely garbage. It should have been a fucking catch, and they overturned it, right? So I completely disagree with that, and so they got fucked on that. The Jets got fucked on that, right? They should have had another score, and then the subsequent play, but again, Brian Flores, that was him. So people want to, like, defend Brian Flores as if he has no say, or like he didn't hear the play call on the 3rd and 20. He couldn't have objected at all. No, of course not. It's all Patrick Graham. But the timeouts are all him. So why would you call a timeout right before that second down play, that 2nd and 8, goal to go? And because he got lucky that they called it back. He got super lucky. But the result of the play, after he had called a timeout with, you know, about 1:30 left to go in the game, it's not like you were going to fucking have time to do anything after that anyway. Okay. Calls a fucking timeout, gives them a chance to regroup, and then they got a fucking touchdown. Got super lucky because it got called back on some bullshit convoluted rule. But, I mean, come on. And then, you know, the Wiltz interception, again, you know, good on Wiltz, but it was also in large part because of Darnold's personal fuck up. He should have just took the sack. Although, again, though, that play shouldn't have even existed because they should have scored a touchdown. Okay. I did talk about this a little bit, but I'm going to touch on it again because he talked about it in his video. Doug talked about the pass interference on Parker, and I mentioned how, you know, he said the pass interference on Parker was bullshit, but then they didn't call, you know, a pass interference on the Jets at some whatever random point in the game, but completely disregarded and didn't even mention the other, like he bitched about the bad officiating, but didn't give you the full context, didn't give people the full context and say that there were a couple bad calls on the Dolphins, including the Christian Wilkins roughing the passer penalty early in the game, where all he did was just push Sam Darnold the same way that Robbie Anderson, within 5 yards as the blocker on the play, just pushed the Dolphins defender. I thought it was a total bullshit call. The difference is, though, in that circumstance, it didn't matter at all because in the Christian Wilkins one, the result of the play was a touchdown. So the only way you were going to reverse that with a penalty would be if it was a Jets penalty. So clearly the Jets declined that because they're not going to accept the penalty and be like, oh yeah, we're going to wipe our touchdown off the board just so that way we can go half the distance to the goal. Like, why would they do that? That would be stupid. If you did something like that, that would suggest you're trying to lose the game, right? But they didn't do that because it would be retarded, right? But whereas the Robbie Anderson pass interference call, right? So he bitched that they didn't call a pass interference on the Jets for some random thing, but they did call it on Robbie Anderson for a bullshit fucking reason. Didn't mention that at all, okay? And killed their second drive. They started the game with momentum. Massive, huge implications on the game. Right? And the Parker one, again, didn't really have implications on the game. At that point, we were up by like 9 points or whatever. It was late in the game. The game was almost over. Did it, yes, take away a 28-yard pickup? Sure. Okay, but again, it didn't matter at that point. The game was pretty much over. Who fucking cares? And while, again, I personally disagreed with the pass interference call on the field, right? Because, again, I just thought it should be let him fucking play, right? It was on the border. It was on the edge of 5 yards. It wasn't clearly within 5 yards like Robbie Anderson was. It was right on the edge of that 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. So it's borderline, right on the fence, right? The two players, Parker and whatever the defender, I don't know who it was, they kind of collided. They were having a little bit of hand fighting, but as Parker was going, and that was at the break of his route, right, the top of his route, as Parker was going into the break of his route, they had the little collision, a little bit of hand fighting, and he was coming out of the break, and as he was doing that, they're on the tape. There's clear full extension of Parker's arm. Doug said in his video that there was not a full extension of Parker's arm. Bruh, you can watch the tape right now. I don't have software, and I apologize because I'm broke. So I don't have the money to purchase the software to be able to like record video and stuff from other sources, like on my computer. That's how I was getting, you know, the press conferences for you, and why I haven't been able to do that in a while, and hopefully I will be able to again at some point. But if I could, I would put the fucking clip in there for you. I would give you guys a clip and show you there was full extension of Parker's arm. It literally, it went from, he was, that motion, that full motion happened. You could slow it down and watch it. It was clear as fucking day. Okay. So, and obviously you need to have clear and obvious evidence that it's not to overturn it. So again, the call on the field was pass interference. So it made perfect sense that the call stood. They didn't confirm it, meaning if they confirmed it, it would have been undeniably pass interference and, you know, 100%. If they overturned it, then they would be saying that it was 100% not pass interference. But because it was on the borderline of the 5 yards, so in, out, and the fact that Parker fully extended, clearly his arm was fully straight out. It went from being tucked in like this to fully straight out. I mean, I don't know what else you call that other than a full extension. And, you know, so it made sense that it stood. Okay, real quick, let's talk about, because he had mentioned how, first of all, Brian Flores took a low-talented team, and he's gotten them to compete every week. Like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? Like, where does any of that that sentence make sense? How does any of that make sense? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, and I actually combined a couple things that he said. So make sure you watch his video. I will put the link to his video, to his analysis video, so you can see the things for yourself, so you know that I'm not like putting words in his mouth, or at least if I'll tell you when I'm paraphrasing, so it's not verbatim. But so, and like I said, I'm combining a couple things, but he said that Brian Flores took a low talented team and has gotten them to compete every week. Every single bit of that is just completely false and not even close to accurate. Okay, so let's take the first part. Brian Flores took a low talented team. No, he didn't take it. He helped to make it low talented again, right? So in most cases, a first year head coach doesn't, you know, you can't say that a first year, in most cases, you were not going to say that a first year head coach has all of his guys and has fully instilled his culture and stuff into a locker room. But that's not the case, right? And you could say that with Adam Gase, who is a first-year head coach with the Jets, and the vast majority of the players on his roster were signed and whatever put there, including C.J. Mosley, Le'Veon Bell, the big-name free agent signings, were signed to that team before he got there. Those were guys that he did not bring in, okay? Because he had nothing to do with it. Brian Flores, on the other hand, all of them, they have jettisoned all of these players and brought in all new guys. Almost the entire team is new names, new faces. Okay? And anybody that wants to try and argue that Brian Flores had absolutely no say whatsoever in any of that is, I don't know what to say to you, because that is absurd and ridiculous to fathom that he had no say whatsoever. That he was not involved in the slightest in the decisions that were made about the players that he was going to have to coach for the entire season. Are you especially when we're supposedly tanking this year to build a bright future, and part of what the coaching staff is supposed to be doing this year is evaluating talent for next year. So it's absurd to think that they had no say whatsoever in the guys that they were going to bring in and have to develop, because part of their job is going to be on the line, their job is going to be on the line, and partly whether or not they can develop this young, unproven, inexperienced group of guys. So it's just fucking absurd. Anyway, and then compete every week. Like, really, bro? Now, I can give him the benefit of the doubt and say the past few weeks. But that's not what he said. What he said was competing every week. Again, paraphrasing a little bit. But he didn't say something along the lines of, recently or in the past few weeks. He said just, we've been competing every week. Bruh, the first game we played, we lost 59-10. 43-0, 31-6, 30-10 in our first 4 games. And that makes sense because we have a young, inexperienced, unproven, lacking in leadership team that played against 4 really good playoff teams from last year and playoff contenders this year. And in the previous 4 games, the opponent has been far weaker on average. And so have we been more competitive the past few weeks? Yes. And that's a credit to the players for busting their ass and fucking putting it all out on the field. But have we lost games and could have lost this last one because of the coaching staff and the decisions that they've made? Yes. Facts. Okay? We can, sit there and talk about, their intent and what they wanted to do all day. But again, best framing is that they just suck at their job and they're inept, and so that they made these play calls because they suck at their job and they're just not good at it. That's the best case scenario. Or with the full context of this entire season and the philosophy set down from the owner that we are tanking to get a quarterback high in the next draft, it's reasonable to think that there was intent there to increase the probability of failure. So, and then, I know this is going on for quite a while now, and I'm getting close to done, but I had a lot to say and a lot to respond to. So then, he, in his little comment of the day or whatever, was somebody saying something about, and again, paraphrasing, something along the lines of, short-term, happiness and success or whatever versus long-term success. And, he was basically saying to Doug that Doug doesn't see the big picture, that, this win is, whatever, it's the long term that matters. Who cares about this win? Now, there's one of 2 ways you could go with that. Either you're coming from the perspective that you want us to lose every game so we can get the number 1 pick because you think what's best for this future is to have a bunch of draft picks and cap space, and that's all you need, right? And all you need to go do is go get a top prospect at quarterback in the draft, or you think that and so that's what's wrong with the win, right? You think, and so that's what you think is wrong with the win, or you come from the perspective, which is more my perspective, that first of all, I like the win and I don't care about the draft positioning, but for me, the short term versus long term is that we've been made into an absolutely bad team, atrocious team now, for no guarantee of long-term success whatsoever. Okay, hopes and dreams that, you know, they can get the picks right and blah 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 whatever, and that they handle the draft correctly, that they prioritize correctly, that they take the best talents, that they you know, do the right thing in free agency, right? And so he had talked about how, Doug had talked about how one of our biggest problems, and a lot of people talk about this, and I agree with this though, is that one of our biggest problems in the past is that we've gone out and we've signed, you know, we've been big money spenders in free agency. We know Stephen Ross loves to do that. He has a history of doing that. The only time he didn't do that was with Gase, and that's because that's not what Gase wanted to do. Gase wanted to draft, and he wanted to bring in cheaper free agents, and then he wanted to pay guys in-house that proved themselves and that produced for the team. Okay, and helped us win. That's what Gase did. That was his philosophy, and that's what he did over 3 years. Gase was the one, and the regime while he was here was the regime that got rid of the bloated contracts, the Ndamukong Suhs, and so on and so forth. Okay, why they you know, let in injury rehabilitating and high-priced Mike Pouncey go. Right? He's actually done pretty well with the Chargers, so you could argue that one. There's an argument to be made against letting him go, for sure. But it was an understandable business move. Anyway, especially because we needed to clear up cap space. We needed to fix our cap situation. So he talked about, you know, that was a major problem in the past, and I agree. He called them flash in the pan free agents, right? You know, big name free agents that are either like in the middle or back end of their primes, that are getting older, that, you know, potentially have injury, whatever, blah, 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 or that have a higher probability of getting injured, even if they don't have an injury history, have a higher probability of getting injured because they're older or what have you, have more wear and tear on them. Right? And so, again, I agree with that. We should not be, but we know Stephen Ross loves to do that. In his time as an owner, the only time he hasn't done that, really, at least recently, has been with Adam Gase, in the few Adam Gase years that we had. And Chris Grier has already come out, and this regime has already come out and said that they are going to be big spenders in free agency. They are going to blow the cap space. They are going to run through it. So, I mean, like, how does anybody then think that we are not going to repeat those same mistakes? And again, Stephen Ross has owned this team for the past, you know, almost couple decades, whatever. And Chris Grier has been part of the scouting department at the very least for almost that entire time. And we've been stuck in mediocrity and now are atrocious in their tenures. So why do people think that we're gonna, and the best drafts that we had were in the fucking Gase years, but we shipped out half those fucking players, and then we're praising guys like fucking Gesicki, but we're giving the credit to fucking Brian Flores. He deserves some credit, and the coaching staff deserves some credit, but he's getting like all this credit for, you know, one really good game by Gesicki. Like, are we fucking kidding? Like, this shit is ridiculous, dude. Anyway, and then he continued on though and said about how we're doing things differently, right? This time around, we're doing things differently. Well, that's true because the Dolphins have never in their entire history adopted a philosophy of tanking and being bad and shipping away all your veteran talent, leadership, production, all that stuff. We have never once, ever, in our 50 plus years as a franchise, ever adopted that kind of philosophy to be as bad as we possibly can, just so that way, and ship out all these guys and accrue draft picks and stuff, just so that way we can hope and dream for the future and go up and take, a quarterback, thinking that that's all we need to fucking turn this franchise around, which is ridiculous. And history has proven that time and time again too. But yes, so I agree it's different. But again, for me, the answer is not to get out of mediocrity. We have to just absolutely destroy everything about the team. Dismantle the team. Fucking blah, 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 blah. And building what? There are a couple bright spots. Preston Williams, but now he's fucking hurt. Devontae Parker is doing all right. Is it going to be enough to keep him around here long term? Right? He's mid-20s now, so he's getting towards the back end, towards the back end of his prime. He's only got 1 year left, but they have an easy out for the next year in his contract. Is he going to even end up being around? Mark Walton. I mean, our run game still hasn't really done much of shit. We regressed in our run game this past week against the Jets. We had a season high in rushing yards like a week or two ago, and then definitely regressed. But he is a bright spot and something that we could certainly build around. There's a couple defensive pieces, right? But, I mean, look, again, almost none of these guys that are on the team right now are either going to be here next year or the year after, or they're going to be like on the back ends of their prime, like Xavier Howard and Raekwon McMillan, right? Jerome Baker. By the time we're even close to competing, these guys are going to be like on the back ends of their prime. And then on top of that, so yes, do we have a bunch of cap space and draft picks? But we have people like Doug who will admit that spending big in free agency is the wrong way to do it. And we have proof and evidence of that throughout, our history, the past few years and so on and so forth, but other teams as well in the NFL. So we'll have people that'll admit that, but then they'll be like, yeah, and get pumped up when Brian Flores and Chris Greer, when he says that we're going to be big spenders in free agency. And then we know they're going to take a quarterback high and they're going to neglect the offensive line and think that that it's going to be remedied by possibly maybe taking one offensive lineman in the first round and then patching it up with a couple, one or two high-priced free agents. And maybe, possibly one of the guys on, that we have here can develop. Maybe. Like, really? Just so contradictory. And then they got a hit on their picks, right? Like, I mean, we have a bunch of them, yes. But, again, do we really think that fucking, Stephen Ross objected to the Minkah Fitzpatrick pick, who's proven to be a phenomenal first-round pick, because he wanted a quarterback. And in fact, though, the quarterback that we had the most probability of getting, because we picked at number 11, would have been Josh Rosen, because he got picked at number 10 by the Arizona Cardinals after they moved up to go get him. We weren't close enough, didn't have the kind of draft capital needed to move up into the top 5. So that was out of the question. There was no way we were going to be able to do that. At best, we maybe could have gone up to 10 to get Josh Rosen. But look how that's turned out. But Minkah Fitzpatrick, a guaranteed commodity who's balling right now for the Steelers, when used properly and in the proper position, okay. I mean, if people think that this regime is going to, okay. And then finally, just one more thing. Again, the one example we have in the NFL of a team that's actually adopted a full-on tanking philosophy, right? A lot of people will talk about the Cowboys. The Cowboys didn't tank. What the Cowboys did, and the examples that they use, where they traded back in the draft to accrue more draft capital. That's how they did it. They didn't do it by purging their entire roster and trading everybody away for draft capital, and they didn't make their team as bad as possible so that way they could get the number 1 pick. They just traded back in the draft and accrued draft picks that way. That's not tanking. That's smart management of your football assets, right? Of your draft assets. And then also, they have a proven track record of picking well. So, and again, Dak Prescott, their quarterback, their franchise quarterback, is not even a first-round pick. 5th round, 5th or 6th round. 5th, I think. So, I mean, it's not example. The one example we have is the Browns, and look at how they're doing. But they'll probably beat us when we go to Cleveland to play them. You know, so, I mean, it just, people's arguments don't make any fucking sense. They leave out so much context and data, and it's just illogical and not rooted in reality. So, look, I'm sorry. I try to be fair to people and stuff like that, and I admit when I'm wrong. You know, I admit, you know, you guys have seen it, right? I admit to being wrong to things, and one of them was that I thought the Jets and the Browns were going to be good this year. Totally wrong about that, right? You know, look, it is what it is at this point, and this is what we got to deal with. But it is important to keep this conversation going. And again, I mean, like, I'm one of the pretty much the only person that I can tell that's really saying some of the things that I say and pointing out, you know, some of the things that I point out. So I'm going to continue to do that. And again, you know, if there's a time and a place where I'm wrong, I'm happy to admit that. And again, also, you know, I want us to win games and I want us to be good. So I was always from the jump against going 0-16, against the tanking philosophy and process and so on and so forth. So I've been consistent 100%. Whereas, you know, some of these other people just like to sit there and fucking cherry pick, flip flop, and then, you know, they'll contradict themselves, you know, time and time again. But they're just, you know, they're incapable of even noticing it, right? It's absolutely crazy. Like, again, how, and just the one example, you know, there's multiple, but the one, you know, is saying that, acknowledging that one of our big problems the past couple decades is high-priced free agents, spending on high-priced free agents in the offseason, and then simultaneously defending and rooting for the Dolphins and Chris Greer and stuff when they say that they're going to be big spenders in free agency. Okay, I mean, if you guys can't see the obvious irony and hypocrisy there, then okay, I don't know what to say to people like that, you know, because it's just not rooted in reality. Anyway, so this video ended up being hella long, almost an hour and a half, but there was obviously a lot to say and a lot to cover. So, but that's where I'm going to end it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Make sure you share my videos and my channel with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.